I want you to kind of go back a year, D Cox. You took us in 94. Let's go
Mhm.
back to 93.
Yeah.
Does the Wu and I and the RZA, this is a lot to unpack, but only B Cox can unpack this the right way. So let me package it up for you if you don't unpack it.
Okay.
The RZA is a genius, in my opinion.
Of course.
The RZA is a mastermind.
Of course.
B Cox, 2 questions I'm asking you.
Okay.
Does the RZA get his just due? And 2, what were the individual contributions of each of those star players from the Wu-Tang collectively and in the game of hip hop? If you may, if you may.
Oh man. Well, does RZA get his just due? I will say, for those of us who knew and were around, yes, he gets his just due. He's on a very short list of producers, probably I would say 10 hip hop producers. When you talk about the best of all time, he's in a very small group of people who are in the consideration for that top 10. And there's very little to no debate about whether or not he belongs in that top 10 either. You could argue with a few people over if you want to put him in over a few other folks, but I think we all know and understand whatever it is that RZA did. When RZA and DJ Premier had their verses, and a lot of people are like on social media, and I love like when they did this shit during verses and they would say, "Oh, Primo got this shit in the bag," and I'm like, "Yo, all right, so listen, number one, I agree overall, yes, but number 2, let's not be so quick to write RZA off, because I don't think y'all understand when he starts pulling shit out of his trick bag, and you're gonna be like, damn, dog, I forgot the RZA actually produced this shit, right? So as the first half of this versus is going, RZA's kind of getting into Primo's ass a little bit.
He was hitting him with some bangers. Because
in fact, I'll never forget in particular Black Thought, who was a little salty about some shit that Primo had said earlier in the verses about Pharoah Monch, and how he said that Pharoah had some of the best control when it came to his words and breath and everything else. And I think Thought kind of took exception to that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but in this first half, RZA kind of giving it to Primo a little bit. And Thought's like, yo, man, Prim, you need to wake your ass up. This nigga digging in your ass right now, dog. He digging in your shit right now, dog. And I think for the majority of us, we're kind of all thinking that. We was like, okay, so when Primo gonna pull the big jokers out real quick? And eventually he did. Later on in the verse, he started pulling them out. But RZA, it wasn't like he started pulling them out and the RZA didn't have nothing to keep coming with. He still had them joints, man. And so when we talk all the way back, going back to 1993, I did enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers for the Vault last year when it came out for 30 years. And I remember going back and listening to that album in full for the first time in probably maybe a couple of years, man. I just sat there in amazement at just like the shit that was happening. And then not only that, because I'm a beat junkie, having produced music myself, I'll always like to go back and jump on Who Sampled, even though a lot of producers don't like that shit. I jumped on whosampled.com to go look and listen to the sample material and where this source material came from for a lot of these beats. And it's incredible the shit that RZA did when he flipped these joints into making these beats, man. Just for enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. Absolutely incredible. So we talk about, yes, RZA's a genius, even though his cousin actually is the genius. But he is a genius. Yes, and it was his genius that spurred that early Wu-Tang success from 36 Chambers all the way through to forever. And then between that is when you have everybody else's contributions happening during that time. So we talk about 93. That's 36 Chambers right there. We'll go ahead and talk about what happened after that. The first album that drops is Method Man on Def Jam to Cal. Now, crazy album, right? And crazy album, very raw. And what you get on that album is not what we hear from a lot of that stuff. Like, a lot of people don't know that the All I Need that you hear on the album is not the shit that you get. Now, All I Need on the album don't even have Mary on it.
No, it does not sound the same. Because
it don't even sound the same. But incredible bangers on that joint. And that's an album from arguably the biggest MC and most famous MC from Wu-Tang Clan, right?
That's a fact.
Many people will tell you that album being released paled in comparison to what would happen later on. So then you move on from 1994 into Cal. You get into the Gravediggers, who RZA was a part of, right? Okay. Very grits group. You're into that horrorcore part thing of rap, talking about all these different things, 5% of Wisdom. really a niche group that RZA gets in and sort of digs and to sort of get his creative juices flowing. 95 comes around, you get ODB, Return to 36 Chambers, man. And the thing is, it's just like this. Everybody sort of looks at ODB and listens, like they look at him as sort of like this whole, I would say, comedic character about things because the way he acted, and he was truly a nigga that was off the hook. When we did hear the stories about ODB, about what shit happened back in the day, that nigga was off the hook. But he handled his biz on this Return to 36 Chambers in only his style, literally doing as only as he can, as he came up with this name, that his style had no father, you know? It was all truly his own.
That's right.
Return to 36 Chambers with some incredible tracks on there. And to me, some of the best producing that RZA has done. But then we get into later on in 1995. And this is where I think RZA truly earns his genius. Raekwon, The Purple Tape.
Man.
Officially titled Only Built for Cuban Links.
Come on, big
Ghostface Killers. I mean, listen, we did a ranking of albums from 1995, and you got to understand also as well what came out in 1995. We're talking about AZ Do or Die, East 1999, A Turtle with Bone Thugs and Harmony, The Infamous by Mobb Deep.
Yes, sir.
All these different albums that came out in 1995, and to me, the best one of that year was Liquid Swords, which I'm going to get to in a second.
Please, we're not going to leave the jizz out. We're not going to leave Liquid Swords out.
The best one out of all of them to me was The Purple Tape, man. You want to talk about really some of the like production wise and vision wise what RZA helped to build with this album that Raekwon put out, knowing that he was one of the assassins that he had in his crew, the chief assassins he had in his crew, and then be able to take a guy like Ghostface and integrate him into this album and to have them absolutely kill it. An album that is so legendary now that it has that nickname of The Purple Tape because of the color of the tape, but because of the quality of it. It's an album that almost 30 years later, we're still playing it like it came out yesterday. And those beats on there, those beats for Ice Cream and Incarcerated Faces, you know?
The video for Ice Cream, I still get excited about, Peacock.
Yeah, verbal intercourse, you know,
with Nas on there.
I mean, just excellence. Fall of 1995, you get into just a Liquid Swords, which if you talk to many Wu heads and hip hop heads, may be some of the favorite work by some of those diehard hip hop and Wu fans is Liquid Swords. Jizza and his lyrical mastery, right? The metaphors, the imagery, and that production. I mean,
shadow boxing with him and Meth.
Shadow boxing, Cold World, Fourth Chamber. You know, I mean, just thinking about it, just at times I sit there and think, and we talk about like there are times when you have what they called cold weather albums. Jizza's Liquid Swords is a cold weather album. It speaks vintage, early 90s New York in the dead of winter, December night. You know, I'm talking about Eddie Bauer, bubble coat, Tim Duck, you know what I'm saying? Thermal shirt underneath, like that type of cold weather. It has that type of feeling to it.
Okay.
So we're in this whole run, 1996. Ghostface Iron Man drops, you know? The first one in the Ghostface trilogy I like to call in excellence. And Iron Man, a crazy album. I mean, then you get to see Ghostface, who showed his thing on 36 Chambers, but really got his man on The Purple Tape the year before. Then he has Raekwon come to support him on his album. And then you have Capadonna coming to also as well. Winter Wars, All That I Got Is You.
Ooh, with Mary on that.
Yeah, Kimay. I mean, come on, dog. Like, there's some tracks on Iron Man that's some of my favorite Ghostface tracks of all time. And so you get into that, and that sort of leads right to 1997 and Forever, you know? And Forever is the second Wu-Tang album. That's the double disc, an album that helped to popularize not just double disc albums because they had come out, but then also there was the ones that had the multimedia by having the exclusive content, being able to download stuff when you put it into your CD-ROM. It gave you extra content on there, you know? And so that little run between 93 and 97, I ran down how many classic albums? Lots of them. Way too many for them for me to count.
Yes, sir.
So here's the scary part about this whole thing, right? Because after 97, RZA stopped producing the Wu projects and he started going into other ventures, i.e. doing house, you know, Ghost Dog producing the score for that,
Yeah.
other projects. And you could tell that the projects of the Wu members afterwards suffered. Method Man, second release, not as good. Raekwon, second release, not as good. You know? So you had some between 98 and 2000, some not so good work come out. But then the reason also why that happened is because of the flood in RZA's basement. That happened in the mid 90s, where the flood in RZA's basement ended up destroying albums and music and beats mostly that were on floppy disk that were destroyed. Some say it was 200 beats, some say it was 300, some say it was even as much as 500 beats. But the biggest casualty of RZA's basement flood was Inspector Deck, because they were crafting Inspector Deck's solo album and it was all lost to the flood. So when they came out with Uncontrolled Substance in 1999, it was a solid album, but for Deck's capability, it was not the album that we were expecting or the album that he should have had.
Come on.
Because I'll tell you this, right? I'm gonna go out here to say this on the limb.
Say it.
Purple Tape, Iron Man, Liquid Swords, Tikal. If Deck gets a properly produced RZA album, it might have been better than all of them. And that's just in my opinion.
Well, Big Cox, if anybody listened to that song Triumph and Deck kick it off, I rhyme atomically.
Yeah.
Man, Socrates' philosophies. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
But that was Deck the entire Forever for real. I tell people when I did my Forever review a couple of years ago, he was the MVP of Forever to me. He was. And that wasn't the only time that Deck let off a verse. Deck let off plenty of different verses on the Wu-Tang projects and killed it every single time that he was on there. I call Deck the Ricky Henderson of hip hop, leading shit off and killing shit every time he go up. Every single time he goes up. So that's why if we would have had a properly produced RZA album pre-flood with Deck on it, I honestly say, it might have been up there where Purple Tape was one of the best Wu solo releases. It might have been, because we knew what Deck was capable of. We knew Deck could rip up a goddamn song with 3/16 or whatever kind of verse structure you wanted to do. He was going to fucking kill it. And then that flood fucked everything up. And it fucked shit up for a lot of different albums too, because there were a lot of stuff that would have gone on some of those albums we just named, and some of the ones even afterwards that we didn't even get. Hell, Supreme Clientele had beats that probably would have been on that album that were not on that album. And look at how it still ended up turning out. So that RZA flood in his basement, man, really is something that I see stop and think about, one of the biggest what ifs. And that is the biggest casualty, was Deck's solo album. Is had we had gotten the RZA production we should have gotten, I think would have been up there with Purple Tape as one of the best Wu releases out there. Really.